Anyway, I see that Josh Holland is joining us now here, and I'm happy to have him. He is a writer. Well, we see his work all over the place in the nation, but I like to just say that he's on with us every so often. So I'm happy to have him come in. His most recent piece, Trump Can't Bail Himself Out by Stoking White People's Fear of Rioting Thugs, is up, and you can read that. In it, he says it's easy to forget that the 2016 Republican National Convention opened with the theme, Make America Safe Again. Trump's campaign echoed Nixon as he claimed that he spoke for the forgotten men and women of America and would stand tall against Mexican rapists and the force of political correctness. Well, I'm quite certain America is probably as least safe as I've ever seen in my entire life. So he's an enormous failure on many fronts, including his own campaign promise. Here to talk to us about this, Joshua Holland. Josh, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Julianna, in these very difficult times.
Very difficult times.
Yes, I mean, that's an understatement. I have a gift for it.
I don't even know.
It's just so stressful. Everything is extremely stressful. And I think that it's important for some of us to say that, we are fighting a fascist movement here. It's very difficult to say that you're painted as a, left-wing radical, but with the complete corruption of the Department of Justice, William Barr ordering the dispersal of peaceful protesters, a coordinated propaganda campaign to delegitimize protests under the guise of this right-wing boogeyman, Antifa. There's probably a few thousand Antifa activists in this entire country.
I understand they're not even an organized group. It's just
there is no Antifa. There is no Antifa. There is at best a loose network of anti-fascist activists. The vast majority of what they do is behind a computer, not in the streets. What most Antifa work is scouring the fever swamps, identifying members of far-right extremist groups, and doxing them. And we can have a debate over that tactic. That's fine. But
doxing, putting out all their information.
They expose them for being members of right-wing extremist groups in order to attach a social and professional cost to that. So they end up often losing jobs. And when they're police officers, they're kicked out of the police force. When they find service members who are members of extremist groups, they are often discharged from the military. Again, we can debate those tactics, but this is a boogeyman. There is no Antifa organizing these protests, looting. There's sporadic looting, which I guess we should expect when we have an 8-minute video of a police officer slowly strangling a man to death in the midst of a Great Depression kind of economic downturn with 40 million lost jobs. Yes, opportunists will smash things. Opportunists will grab things. If you're focusing on the sporadic riots, sporadic looting, and not on this outburst of resistance from civil society writ large, you are assisting this country in its slide towards authoritarianism.
Oh, well, there's your answer to one of the questions that came in before you actually came on the air. You can just, from Crypto Joe in our Twitch chat, you can just tell your friend exactly what Josh Holland just said. We're speaking with Josh Holland, writer for The Nation. Josh, there's just so much to discuss.
Yes, there is.
I know in your latest piece, you compared the route that Trump is taking to save his popularity, after the botched handling, or in the midst, shall we say, of the botched handling of the coronavirus to Richard Nixon. Can you talk about why they are alike?
I actually pushed back on that comparison. There was a lot of talk of Democrats always wring their hands. They never pass up an opportunity to be nervous about things. And there was a brief flurry of comparisons between 2020 and 1968. 1968, for those listeners or viewers who don't know, was a year that it did not parallel this year in terms of there was no pandemic, there was no massive economic crash, there was no environment, there was no climate disaster. But there was extremely high levels of crime. There was social unrest, widespread social unrest. The Vietnam, it was the peak of the resistance to the Vietnam War. First, Martin Luther King was assassinated. A few months later, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. There was rioting in a lot of cities across the country, and Richard Nixon adopted a law and order campaign he made central to his campaign. It was thinly coded racial dog whistles, widely perceived as such correctly, and he won. He won, and then he stayed with that theme through the 1972 election when he won very, very big. And I don't see Trump. I don't see I don't think it's a good parallel, and I'll tell you a couple of reasons. First of all, Nixon was very experienced. He was a veteran politician. He was a creature of Washington. He was boring. He was stoic. And when he pitched himself as a kind of rock, as a stabilizing presence in an era of great tumult. And, Donald Trump is a chaos monkey. He's a chaos. Nobody is going to turn to Donald Trump for stability or order, right? Law and order, the second part of that is important. People were attracted to the idea that Nixon could return us to the status quo ante, a simpler time, a time when people weren't out in the streets, cities weren't on fire, and Trump can't do that. The other thing that I think is really important to understand is that we have never seen, in the modern polling era, we've never seen a president whose approval rating was as immobile as Donald Trump's. And I point out in the piece that Trump's approval rating is the same today as it was in the beginning of this year. That is to say, 107,000 mostly avoidable deaths, 40 million jobs lost, multiple stock market sell-offs did not move his approval rating down, and it did not move his disapproval rating up more than a small amount. And there is, opinions are set. If you think that Trump is a competent president who cares about anybody besides himself and his small inner circle and his clan, then your opinion is probably not going to change much. Certainly not for the, we'll see if he loses. He is losing some support among key constituent groups. The older voters are particularly pushing back on him. But
really?
Yeah, but you can't imagine. Well, I mean, that whole campaign to kill your grandmother for the stock market is not going over that well with your grandmother. Yeah, grandma doesn't really like that. Thank you.
Okay, that's a plus.
But if you're within the majority, and it's important to remember how unpopular this president is, because what the media tend to do is focus on, Trumpers in Trump country still love Trump. That's not an interesting story, but they tell it again and again. And it obscures how unpopular this president is. His approval rating, that is, his net approval rating, that is his approval numbers minus disapproval numbers, went underwater, went into negative territory in his 15th day in office. And it has stayed about 10 points underwater, give or take, for the entirety of his term. So, this is a guy who's very unpopular, and it's just extremely unlikely that as he flails around and, attacks peaceful protesters to go take a stupid photo op, Americans are going to rally around him as a symbol of, continuity or stability.
What do you think? What do you make of his? I know this is bad, so let's just go beyond that. But what do you make of his Trump's, desire or wanting to call in the military to fight against our own citizens here? Talk a little bit about that. I mean, we've been talking about impending fascism.
That's it.
Seems like it's not pending anymore. It's just
fascism is here, right? Our choices are to submit or resist. This is not an authoritarian country because we are resisting. The moment we stop resisting, we become an authoritarian state. It's that simple. As far as the threats of calling out the military, first of all, I would like to point out that he brags about calling out the National Guard, and he has nothing to do with that. They are under state orders. Those are governors that called out the National Guard. He has no authority to call out any National Guardsmen. what he's done is, and this is, I would hope that we would see after the events of this past week, a renewed effort for statehood for DC, because what we've seen is he has marshaled a lot of federal firepower in this little city that has no statehood. And DC exists as this weird, like, fiefdom for the federal government. He is able to do this in DC. He is not able to do what he's doing in DC in any other place. He can get compliant red state governors to call out their National Guard, and blue state governors have as well. The governors have called out the National Guard, but they're under the governor's control. In DC, it's different. And probably the most disturbing thing, arguably, everything has been very disturbing this week. One of the most disturbing things, let me not say the most disturbing thing, but one of the most disturbing things was the presence of anonymous, heavily armored, are they law enforcement? Are they troops? I don't know. There were a number of guys in uniforms with riot gear without any identification. And when reporters asked them what agency they were with, they refused to identify themselves. This should send just a shiver down the spine of anybody who believes in liberal democracy. This is outrageous. There is zero accountability. We don't even know what agency they're with, or if they're with an agency. Are they private contractors?
Blackwater troops.
What the hell are these people?
Yeah.
And it reminds me, and it's not original, right? Other people have mentioned this on social media. It is reminiscent of the little green men, the so-called little green men, Russian troops with no identifying anything in the Ukraine. And Russia saying, we don't have any troops in the Ukraine. We don't know who these people are. And they're obviously Russian troops. It's frighteningly similar. Who are these people? And where is, who can find out? It doesn't seem like, we have it appears that we have an impotent opposition party in the midst of this. We're sliding into an authoritarian government, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, who can hold two questions out of the last thing that you said. How can we get some accountability here? Number one, and number two we've been seeing some responses from some military leaders, former military leaders.
Yes.
Is there any hope there that they will stop us from a slide into military dictatorship? Have you heard anything from the on the ground current, people who would be called up into service? What do we know about what's happening on that end?
I think it's hard to make sweeping statements about any of that because we're in uncharted territories and we're going off of anecdotes. I have heard anecdotes about troops saying that they will, National Guardsmen and reservists saying that they will not respond to a call out against U.S. citizens to police protests. We still have a free press. If you're looking for the positive sides, this is what it is. We still have a free press. Journalists are being assaulted by the police in police riots across this country. Over 110 instances of journalists being attacked by police during these protests. We've seen a CNN news crew, an entire crew being arrested live on TV. The big story in Australia is their leading mainstream evening news program. Their correspondents were brutally attacked by police, punched in the face by riot police. Despite all of that, we have a functional press. There does seem to be a capacity for shame. This week we saw Defense Secretary Esper reverse course to try to maintain his own reputation. And he said that, the Insurrection Act is inappropriate, that troops should not be, he pushed back against Donald Trump's blather. But first he went along with it and was humiliated, basically. If you saw his press conference yesterday, it was an exercise in, reputational cleanup. But these are the things if you're looking for, rays of light in all of this, I would say it is that we do have a media, that there is a professional ethos within the armed forces, very, very strong institutional culture of deferring to civilian control, which is, not great under these circumstances, given the civilians who are in control right now. But there is an equally strong, norm against using military troops for law enforcement against the U.S. citizens. That is one reason for optimism. Another reason for optimism, and maybe this is the biggest reason for optimism, is that we're Americans and we're not taking this shit. And whenever you see this crackdown, the next day there's more people out there. And if you're as incensed about this as I am, you need to find a protest. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Try to socially distance. We're trying to fight off a fascist movement in the midst of a fucking pandemic. But do what you have to do to get out there and resist, because, again, the second we stop resisting.
I actually think the pandemic helps this, because so many people don't have jobs and everything's closed. And it's not like, oh, I'm at the protest because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
But, this is about police brutality. It's about that Black Lives Matter. But I think it is growing to be about more than that. Go ahead. We talked a little about.
No, I mean, it is, there's reaction to backlash, right? So we have seen, white nationalists energized. There's like gangs of
Proud Boys.
There's gangs of Proud Boys. There was a white supremacist group that put up a website impersonating Antifa and calling for violence across the country. There was a black church shot up in Louisville, Kentucky the night before last, got almost no media. But, this is what we're fighting. And I think that we're all, there's been so much tension building in this country for the last 3 years, and it's all coming out. So it's about Black Lives Matter. It's about the killings. But it's also about a rejection of, the crackpot authoritarianism in the White House.
What other, we spoke about Australia and this being covered in the Australian media about what happened to the Australian journalists. Internationally, how is this playing out, other than Putin being thrilled at the demise of the United States and all the fomented gas here?
The world is aghast at what they're seeing. That's very clear. And there's been protests in all 50 US states, but there's also been protests in capitals across the world. Huge crowds in Paris, in Amsterdam, just big crowds. People are coming out, and in the post World War II era, a lot of people have looked to the United States as a kind of bulwark of liberal democracy for all of our flaws. The people abroad look at us like that, and I think that we've shaken Donald Trump and the movement that he leads has shaken the world's confidence in us in a way that it may or may not be reparable.
Josh, final thoughts on what we should be watching for in the next few days? I understand Black Lives Matter is putting out their agenda of what they would like to see happen on Sunday, but I'm not sure what else we should.
I mean, the thing is that I don't think this is going to be over in the next few days. Look for how things are escalating. I mean, what you see is these curfews. There's a broad assault on a broad attempt to suppress the resistance that we're seeing right now, this outpouring of anger and demands for justice across this country. That's the thing to watch. I mean, basically, again, we have police agencies that are attacking protesters, peaceful protesters, again and again, we've seen this.
I haven't really seen any video, Josh, of like cops catching the guy busting the window as he's busting. You know what I mean? I've seen
they don't actually seem to be very dedicated to dealing with looters.
No, they're not, and they just want to spray a pregnant woman in a car with pepper spray bullets.
Listen, Julianna, there was a survey done by Police Magazine in 2016, and they asked 3,600 active working police officers who they were supporting in the election. 84% supported Donald Trump. And Trump has spent the last 3 years demonizing the press, attacking civil society, spewing conspiracy theories about, and more recently spewing conspiracy theories about, rioting, Antifa, whatever. And, that rhetoric has consequences, right? Those cops are all watching Fox News. They have a different impression of reality than we have, and they're acting it out. So, the whole thing.
So it does kind of serve the white nationalist narrative to have looting, even if it's perpetuated by the white nationalists.
Absolutely. That absolutely plays into their hands. And my whole thing is, I don't condone looting. I just put it in perspective. It's a handful of looters are out there. Of course they are. I mean, in a situation like this, of course, you're going to have a handful of looters. Maybe if the police weren't spending so much time and resources attacking peaceful protesters, they could do something about the looting. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And also maybe if the mainstream media would actually show images of the peaceful protesting, I think.
Well, maybe the mainstream media should say what's happening, which is that we're seeing police riots. Police riots are terrifying. As soon as police stop upholding the law, they are rioters, and they're armed, and they're organized, and they're rioting. It's extremely, extremely dangerous.
Josh, stay well as can be expected. Thank you for the work that you're doing to help us all understand exactly what is going on. And I do want to say that I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Julianna. I appreciate you being here too.